All right, gentlemen, so we're here in Hyde Park at our Hyde Park Revival Project. This is a 100-year-old house that one of the original builders in this neighborhood, who built a bunch of really awesome stonework and masonry, built this home. And so when we got here, we met with this client. There was discussion of tearing this down, and I've built a bunch of new homes in Austin. I've torn down a bunch of homes in Austin, and part of my whole excitement about bringing something special to the table as a native Austinite is that I'm not going to tear down homes anymore. So I'm going to go out of my way to really do up these older homes and educate people on why it's possible and the benefit of doing that. Because I'm personally, as an Austinite, I'm so tired of driving through and seeing all the old homes that I've looked at as a child get knocked down. So this one we were able to save. That's why we're calling it the Hyde Park Revival. Actually, as a kid, grew up in Hyde Park until about 5 years old. And I'll share more of that with y'all about that in a moment. But come check out this crawl space, right? This is where we're gonna get started today. All right, so crawl spaces really, they're not the most exciting places in the world most of the time. This one to me has really piqued my interest, and it all started with a post from Christine Williamson from Building Science Fight Club. So I've worked on a bunch of old homes in Austin, Texas. This one has cedar piers inside it. If you get a peek of the camera real quick, you can see that cedar pier inside there. So I've crawled around under many of these houses and crawl spaces, and you've got a bunch of these big, beautiful, multi-million-dollar homes here in Hyde Park that sit on cedar piers. And in the past, whenever I've operated on a crawl space, I have thought about doing things like insulating under the floor system, and a lot of times that's involved closed cell foam. Most of these older homes have subfloors that the wood floor is actually the subfloor and the finished floor. There is no additional subfloor, so you have a lot of air communication, air leakage, and all that sort of thing. And so it gets to be the type of situation where you don't know the best move oftentimes. And so there's not really a by-the-book answer for it. So in this particular one, I was avoiding doing the foam insulation, and I wanted to come up with a different solution. I didn't know what to do, so I didn't really do anything. And then I saw on Instagram one of Christine's posts that she laid out this beautiful design for a conditioned crawl space. We also call these clean spaces sometimes. And the thing about her design that piqued my interest so greatly was that she didn't want to use any spray foam. And me personally, if y'all followed any of my stuff, you'll realize I'm really not a spray foam guy. I'm not into it. And so for me, I was looking for an alternate solution to spray foaming that subfloor. And Christine approached it with the idea of insulating on the side of the skirts. And so this is going to be our skirt in this instance. My floor is like right up here. And so this is my perimeter skirt. So we've yet to insulate or do anything with that yet, but our plan is actually to install some hemp insulation up against the skirt from the inside in lieu of the spray foam. Christine did use spray foam in her instance, but again, it was on the side versus underneath the floor system. And the other dynamic here that I wanted to bring to the table with some level of play and an experimental approach is I wanted to try to do a crawl space that was repeatable by others for not a lot of money. So everything I had heard about with regards to these crawl spaces, like even Christine's, for example, I spoke with her in direct message. I think she spent at least 15 grand. She said a lot of it had to do with cleaning out the crawl space. And then you've got to have somebody crawl around, lay this poly down on the ground, and that can be kind of tedious. And then you're kind of wrapping around all the piers and taping and all that sort of thing. And then from there, you're figuring out what you're gonna do with the insulation and all that good stuff. So I wanted to create something that made sense to me and my clients, and again, was very repeatable all over Texas and all these hot, humid climates where this could be applicable. And I wanted a conditioned crawl space that was achievable for, let's say, under $5,000 easily. And I think that this is what we have here. So without further ado, we've got some 5 mil poly. There's definitely better poly out there. You can go all the way up to 20 mils. So we used actually what was laying around in the back of somebody's garage, and we brought this 5 mil poly. We overlaid it with I think 6 inches at least overlay anywhere we had any seams. We didn't bother ourselves with trying to make everything perfect. So this is a very imperfect crawl space. And the idea is that we were gonna do a pretty good one, right? And so I'm calling this a condensation-less crawl space, and I think that's what we've got here. So all of our HVAC equipment is in here. We've got a dehumidifier in here, and we actually added a bunch of vents to all the skirts. This is a vent right here. And I did that before I realized what the ultimate decision was gonna be, that we were actually gonna condition this crawl space, right? So even though I added the vents, I'm gonna use some of the vents to exit out some air. I've got some ducts and all sorts of things that are connected to the home. And like, for example, fresh air to the home is being ducted and going through one of these. And so we actually made use of a lot of these vents. But some of them I'm ultimately going to cancel out, and I'm going to cover up with poly, and we're going to basically delete them, but visually they're going to still appear here. The poly could always be removed in the future if somebody wanted to go back to a more traditional crawl space environment. So the biggest question was, how are we going to make sure that we do not, or how are we going to condition the space, right? Are we going to do some negative pressure draw with fans? Or are we going to actually create a supply and a return down here with the HVAC? Are we going to incorporate our dehumidifier that's living down here with this space as well? And we chose none of those, right? So what we finally opted for was an inexpensive, let's say sub $200 dehumidifier. And we're gonna install that down here, and it's gonna drip out, and it's gonna feed this wonderful bamboo that's gonna live like right around here. And the reason we chose that is because incorporating the dehumidifier here was going to involve any potential dirt or kind of like dirtier air than theoretically is inside the house. And even though we put down all the poly, we just made a decision that we didn't want to muck up our nice dehumidifier with any of that air or worry about any returns or anything. So we're going to leave that nice, expensive dehumidifier to service our house. Even though it's living down here, it's going to service our house with its supply and return. And then we're going to install that inexpensive dehumidifier. I think I got it for $150 on Amazon. Got a pretty small one, and you have variable speeds on it, so we'll probably set it to the lowest speed. And we're going to install that in here, and we're just going to run a little drain line out, and we're going to, again, feed the plants with that. We're going to put a drain pan underneath it just in case it leaks or anything like that, and that's going to have some sort of exit as well. So yeah, in the end of the day, what we're getting is a condensation-less crawl space, and it's going to cost us well less than $5,000. And it's so much better than what was here before. The big concern that you have, right, when you don't condition a crawl space or you don't insulate or any of these things, is you get what's called vapor drive. And if you're familiar with building science and you followed the Build Network, obviously most people here are really into building science, and you probably know a little bit about vapor drive. So what goes on with vapor drive is more always wants to go to less. So that means like the hot, humid air, the moisture in the air wants to go to that cool, dry air. So here in Texas, we're in a climate where we're always cooling our homes, right? So that means inside here, it's always gonna be cool. It's always gonna be dry. So any sort of hot, humid air, it's gonna try to go to that dry, cooler air, right? So we've got our vents right here. Hot, humid air says, hey, I want to go inside. I want to pass inside. You've also got moisture that comes up from the ground, right, and the earth. And so that's why we put down this poly. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to mitigate that moisture from the earth from rising up, and we're blocking it with what's called a vapor barrier. But with the vents here, like you have in traditional crawl spaces, what goes on is that moist air goes and it wants to hit right up under my subfloor. So right here, it's wanting to go, and it's just wanting to lay up there and hang out. And it's saying, hey, I want to go inside that space. And so we're trying to figure out, well, how do we prevent that from happening, right? And that's where you get into the whole idea, well, I'm going to spray foam all this and everything. So then you know what happens as soon as you say that you're going to spray foam that, then you get somebody that comes in and says, hey, what if you get a leak upstairs or something like that in the house, right? Now you've created a bathtub environment. And also, what if you somehow rot the bottom of the floor and all that sort of thing? So there's a lot of like pros and cons, and I've definitely spray foamed up under some of these houses in this exact application. And as far as I'm concerned, I did it successfully. And again, I did that with closed cell spray foam when I've done that in the past. But I really didn't want to try to spray foam this. Also, the crawl space is really tight in the back side of the house. So spray foaming really didn't even seem totally achievable. And I also was trying to come up with a way of just leaving this wood how it was, and it didn't seem like it had a lot of problems before. It seemed like it was doing pretty good and operating pretty well. And I always factor in the historical data that I have on any given renovation by doing my own research and due diligence on how the home has performed over the years. So this home has obviously been here for over 100 years. When it first came into its lifespan here, that didn't have central HVAC. So that was added later. And when you add HVAC, now you get more of an extreme with temperatures within the house and outside the house. And that's when you get a lot of these vapor drive issues that can lead to mold and mildew and many other problems that we have inside homes. And so we want to avoid the mold and mildew. We want to avoid issues with vapor drive. And insulation is a key component in doing that. But again, in this situation, I wanted to figure out a way, a novel approach, a trick, some sort of play where I could eliminate spray foaming under that subfloor, right? And so I was doing hemp insulation inside the house. And with that hemp insulation, I must have screwed up on my order or something, and I had a little bit too much. And then I realized I had enough to install on the perimeter skirt here. And then I had to figure out, well, how am I gonna do it? So the guys at Huber had sent me a really cool gun to be able to install their subfloor, and with that foam adhesive. So it's like a foam glue that sprays nicely out of their gun. And so I'm gonna play around with that. I haven't installed that in here just yet. I'll show you in a few the actual hemp insulation itself. It comes in bat form. But basically I'm planning on just gunning up against the side here and just slamming my hemp insulation up on the edge, on the side of the skirt. And then I'm not gonna come into contact with the ground. I'm gonna leave just a little gap. Part of the reason for that, and one of the big concerns anytime you're insulating on the side of the skirt, and again, I'm on the inside of the house here, is termites, right? So people, that was one of the things that came up in Christine's post a lot was, hey, what about termites, termites, termites? So with Christine's post, she created a nice little detail. It was like a metal angle that was essentially an area where you could see termites crawling. That's kind of the visual you're always trying to understand with termites is, are they in existence? Can you see termite trails and all that sort of thing? And you don't want to give them passageways that are crevices back behind an area that is visually accessible. So I was trying to just simplify it, and I was like, you know, that's probably good to do something like that, but if I just elevate the insulation slightly up off the ground and leave myself a visible area, then I can probably avoid having any termites be able to trail up without me visually seeing them. You know, the number one achievement out of all this is we're going to eliminate any vapor drive issues that are going to potentially cause moisture and condensation to congregate up under our subfloor, creating a moldy situation that would be not nice for our clients or the lifespan of this home. So without further ado, feel free to peek in there, and I hope you enjoy our condensation-less crawl space.